prior to humans being active whalers. When you're talking about early whales, they're much smaller in body size. They might have a much larger population. We simply don't know. But they're not constrained by the same things that very large whales are. I mean,
Dr. Prothero, you have to end now. So
okay,
we can give the other side an opportunity to rebut.
A couple of points I'm going to hand off to my colleague when I'm done. First of all, did you notice the condescension there? You know, if you guys had been following the literature with the recent developments, I think Dr. Sternberg, who is a trained evolutionary biologist with 2 earned PhDs, who's worked at the Smithsonian and the NIH and who publishes in the field, has been following the literature. Secondly, I've been following the literature on the Cambrian as well. There are 15 phyla alone that are known from soft-bodied parts in the Chengjiang, in the Mao Sheshan Formation, that documents the sudden appearance of those new phyla. In a layer just beneath it, a Precambrian layer, there have been preserved small, microscopic, soft-bodied sponge embryos, but none of the ancestral forms to the Cambrian phyla that arise just subsequent to it. Now ask yourself a question. If those sediments can preserve small, soft-bodied embryo, why don't they preserve the hard-bodied ancestors to those phyla that first arise in the Cambrian? This is not a problem of missing fossil evidence. It's not a problem that things aren't being fossilized because the soft-bodied parts can't be fossilized. So, and now Rick had some comments about evolution.
I have several comments directed to both of my opponents. Number one is with regard to the quote-unquote fossil fallacy that I used. I accept that transition. I'm not arguing that where are the transitional forms. What I'm arguing is that that window of time is very short, and yes, the changes are dramatic. So my question isn't where's the Ambulocetus, or where's the Pakicetus, or where's the Georgicetus. No, my question is where's the mechanism. Now he also mentioned, well, we've got 3 billion years of life. That's what you've got to use as your backdrop. No, you don't. I picked a very easy problem according to the literature. It's a transition that is reasonably well worked out. Yes, you can look at the embryology, and yes, you can follow the features, or you could look at Kempf's work on the reptile to mammal transition, and on and on and on. But the thing is, given a certain window of time and tabulating the number of changes, if you are going to assume a population genetic mechanism, then you can apply certain equations. Now he says, well, of course, this is from the 1930s and 1940s and 1950s. No, I use recent mutation rates. And here's the interesting thing. Speaking about the recent literature, Dr. Prothero, and this is a lot of work that Michael Lynch has done, who is no friend to creationism or intelligent design, I might add, is that when you look at mammalian and vertebrate population sizes, the equations of natural selection don't apply. Genetic drift is a rule. I brought the papers here. In his book, 381 pages, he devotes literally a page, about a sentence, to population genetics. What he does present, Dr. Prothero, I should say, what he does present is a 4-winged dragonfly and an 18-winged dragonfly. And the caption to this is the evolutionary mechanism by which Hox genes allow arthropods to make drastic changes, in their number of segmentation and wings, etc. Now, of course, and then he cites to another figure. Well, the problem is this. We have a plethora of such mutations. You can get a catalog of Drosophila mutants. Right now, they are mutating. There's a project to mutate every single mouse gene, and over 95% of those genes have been mutated. Now, my challenge to both of you is go to those catalogs. You can pull those papers right off of PubMed.org, the NIH's literature. Look through those and tell me what number of them are of the type, they make dramatic body changes, but many of them are negative. I'm not denying that such changes could have happened. I'm not denying the fossil sequence. And I'm not arguing for more transitional forms. But what I'm saying is one thing to show a mythical 18-winged dragonfly next to a 4-winged dragonfly, and to say that, therefore, the evolutionary mechanism has been worked out.
Do you mean there has never been an 18-winged dragonfly that we know of?
I consulted a fossil dragonfly expert, and to my knowledge, there has been no 18-winged dragonfly known.
So how does a picture of one demonstrate the creative power of natural selection?
It's an assertion. But the point is It's done all the time. Here's a paper, for example, on the reptile to mammal transition by a fellow who, again, is no intelligent design creationist. He just said, here we have a transition. Can this be explained knowing what we know? And no, you must invoke some other type of scenario. In his case, he opts for self-organization theory. I picked a very narrow scope, and this is done all the time. People pick tractable problems.
It's called scientific analysis.
It's called developing a testable hypothesis and work on the backdrop. Thank you.
Okay, are you gentlemen through interviewing each other? It's like a dog and pony show over there.
I'm happy to interview you too, Mike.
The point of what I was challenging about the question of intelligence and gaps. So Dr. Prothero gave you an answer to the question of where those structures come from, so-called abruptly, although you admitted it. By abruptly, Dr. Sternberg, you meant a few million years. Well, with Evo Devo, we can see these kinds of dramatic changes happen very rapidly. So that's our answer. That's one of our answers. You don't accept that. Well, what is your answer to it? How many acts of intelligence or creation or whatever word you want to use do you think happened? And more importantly, if you're going to act like a scientist would want to know, how did it happen? What's the actual mechanism of the intelligence, the act of creation? So I'll just pick one of your many on your list. The fluke of the motion of the tail from side to side to up to down. Mm-hmm. Okay, how do you think the intelligence changed that? Do you think the intelligence manipulated the genome? Did he or she use a combination of Evo Devo, some embryological developmental changes? Or do you think the intelligence spoke it into the language and said, I hereby command you to fluke up and down rather than left and right? What do you think actually happened? We'd like to know.
Well, what I think actually happened is that, yes, you do have a series. And by the way, making jokes is not an adequate scientific response. What I do think is that there are alternative scientific theories that should be investigated. You keep trying to paint me into this corner that I am one of the established intelligent design theorists or that I am a creationist, when I'm on the public record stating what I actually think. I'm a structuralist. And so I do think, yes, there is a scientific explanation. And I do agree with population genetics. What I do not think is that just assuming that you can get a series of DNA changes over time is going to give you these dramatic changes in body plans. I came here to talk about one thing and one thing only, and that is the efficacy of the neo-Darwinian mechanism. I did not come here to talk about intelligent design and creationism and the existence of God, or whether or not, with respect to the house mouse, every sperm is sacred. I didn't come here to discuss that. And that is what I'm talking about, just one simple thing. Whether or not, when we look at these transitions, a slice of the fossil record, accepting the sequence, whether or not, by standard population genetic formulations, the explanation that you assume is the correct one. It came out in 1859, was gussied up in the 1930s, and is generally good to go by the consensus. What I'm arguing is that it does not have traction. Natural selection doesn't have traction.
Okay, but we're really close here to finding some agreement. You said you're a structuralist, so do you think that the change of motion from left and right to up and down in the whale happened because of some inherent natural structural change that occurs because it's built into nature? That is, it's part of the natural world? Or do you think an intelligence reaches into our time and space, into nature, and actually manipulates the genome?
Michael, why don't you ask me about that, since I'm an advocate of intelligent design?
I'll ask you, Stephen. What do you think?
Richard is a skeptic of neo-Darwinism. He's also a skeptic of your Evo Devo models with Hox genes. Hox genes have big problems. For one thing, they're not good explanations for the origin of new body plans because they're expressed late in the development of organisms after body plans have already been established. They also produce these grotesque